My wife opened our marriage without my consent, then got an STD and got pregnant in the middle of all this. I knew a woman who respects me, Andrea. My wife of 29 years, beautiful and radiant, confessed to me that she wanted to have relationships outside of our marriage for her. It seemed like something clear and simple to understand. But for me, it was an unexpected blow. She had planned a special dinner at one of our favorite restaurants. Everything was perfectly organized, white tablecloths, an excellent selection of wines, and she had even bought a diamond necklace that she was wearing, hinting that she loved it. I spent almost $1,000 on that necklace, not imagining that very soon I would have to rethink how to get that money back during dinner. I noticed that Andrea was restless. Our typical relaxed conversations had a tinge of tension. She seemed distracted, looking around the restaurant as if she was looking for something or someone normally. When she looked at me, her gaze was firm. But that night, it wandered without focus after we finished the main course and drank more wine. Finally, she decided to talk about what was on her mind. "Honey there. Something I've been thinking about for a while, and I think it's time to talk about it," she said with a serious tone, very different from the usual one. I put my glass of wine aside, worried about what she might say. My mind wandered. For a moment, wondering if maybe I was ready to start a family. We had talked about having children in the past, but we decided to wait until we were more stable in our careers and finances. We had already reached those goals, and I thought that was what she was going to tell me. But as she avoided eye contact, I knew it was something else, something that didn't feel right. "Honey, we need to talk," Andrea repeated with a serious look that I hadn't seen in her before. "I've been reflecting a lot, and this is really important to me. I need to find out who I am outside of ourselves. I think this will help me be a better partner in the long run." I was stunned. My mind was going around. What was she saying? I tried to stay calm, but I felt like something very bad was coming. "I want to see other people. I want us to be okay with this to avoid hurting each other in the future." She blurted out the words. They hit. Like a ton of bricks. I felt my heart pound, and the blood rushed to my face. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What are you talking about?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady, although anger was starting to invade me. "Do you want to date other men?" Andrea bit her lip and after a pause confirmed what I feared most. Yes, I could be part of it. The world spun around me. How could I even bring something like that up? I expected him to be okay with it. My frustration quickly turned to anger. I pulled away when he tried to take my hand. "I love you. That hasn't changed. I just need to explore this part of me. It's something I have to do." He tried to explain, but his words didn't calm me. It was a betrayal disguised as honesty. The bustle of the restaurant disappeared. Our life would never be the same. How could I even think I would accept something like that? I had a hard time finding the words, and when I finally found them, they were harder than I intended. "You want to have an adventure, and you expect me to just accept it," I said, unable to contain her fury. Andrea leaned over to me and asked me to lower my voice. "Worried about the looks from the other diners, keep it calm. We don't need the whole place. To find out SSEO." Then I understood I had chosen this very busy place thinking that I wouldn't make a scene. It was a trap, and I fell into it without even realizing it. I felt nauseous. I could barely process what was happening. Why Andrea? Why other men? I kept asking, looking for an answer that would somehow make me understand her logic. "I'm not leaving you, Rob," she said with firm but sweet eyes. "I just need to explore this part of myself. I ask you for a few months after that. I promise I'll be all yours again." Her words floated in the air, heavy and loaded with uncertainty. How could I even consider accepting something like that? My mind was blank. It was our 5th anniversary dinner, and my wife had just proposed that I start seeing other men. She believed that in the end, everything would go back to how it was before. But there was no way that was true. I got up, left the napkin on the table, and finished my glass of wine in one gulp. Without another word, I left. Andrea called me as I left, but I did not turn around. I drove aimlessly for hours. My mind could not think of anything else but what had just happened. In the end, I woke up in my car the next day with a headache, and in an unknown place I stretched and tried to convince myself that it had all been just a nightmare. but it was not waking up and facing the situation. With my wife was inevitable. I knew that if she insisted on staying, our relationships with other men, that would mark the end of our marriage no matter what. She said the night before, I couldn't stop thinking that maybe she wasn't the woman I thought I was marrying. Maybe she was going through some crisis or emotional breakdown that was leading her to come up with ideas that were completely out of touch with reality. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm just a man confused and lost at this point. I checked my phone, which I had turned off at some point in the night. I saw several messages and missed calls from Andrea worried about my whereabouts and well-being. I didn't feel ready to go home or talk to her, but I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. I decided not to answer her right away, after having several cups of coffee and a breakfast of eggs and bacon. I outlined a basic plan for what I should do next. The time to face the situation at home had arrived. As I pulled into the driveway, Andrea ran out the front door with her face full of worry. "Honey, where were you all night? I was so scared thinking that you had had an accident or something worse," she said, trying to kiss me. I took a step back and answered her firmly. "Andrea, I need to take a shower and clear my head after that. We need to talk seriously about what you mentioned last night." I walked past her and went straight to the bedroom, taking off the suit I had been wearing all night. I took a long, hot shower, taking advantage of the time to rehearse what I needed to say. The doubts swirled in my mind. Did he still have a wife, or was this his way of saying goodbye? Was this a test to see how committed he was? I tried to understand what she was thinking, but I was going crazy. I loved her. That was clear. I married her. We had a beautiful wedding and celebrated our union with a trip to Europe. I never thought about being with another woman. I was completely committed to her. But now it seemed that she no longer shared that feeling. Luckily, we didn't have children, which made things a little simpler. But what happened in the next few days or weeks would change our lives forever after. After changing clothes, I headed to the kitchen and made another cup of coffee. I grabbed a notepad and pen while Andrea watched me from the kitchen island. I tried to stay calm, but inside my emotions were in chaos with the coffee in hand. I sat down in front of her. "Andrea, could you explain to me again why you want to explore relationships outside of our marriage?" I asked, trying to stay in control. Andrea looked directly at me and said, "Honey, I need validation as a woman. I feel like my needs aren't being met, and I want to explore what I really need to see if I can find fulfillment on my own. So you're not sure what you need, and you're trying to figure it out." I summarized, trying to keep my tone firm. "Are you planning to distance yourself from our relationship temporarily to find what you're looking for?" I asked her. "No, I won't leave. I'll stay here in our house with you," she answered quickly. "However, I need the freedom to do things my way." "And when are you thinking about getting started on this?" I asked her, looking for clarity. "I guess any time would work," she answered with some uncertainty in his voice. "You're expecting me to agree to this?" I said, feeling the tension build in my chest. "I don't agree with any of this, Andrea. When we got married, we promised to be partners and lovers for life. Now you want to find other lovers. What am I supposed to do with that? I feel like you're walking out of our marriage." "Honey, isn't that right?" he said in frustration. "I need to find a connection that's been missing. For the past few years, our lives have become about work, and I don't feel appreciated by you anymore, like I did when we were married. I appreciate everything you do for me," I replied, "to provide and build the future we dream of. We're about to pay off this house, for God's sake." I knew I had to address the most urgent issue. "Are you planning on having relationships with other men?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "I can't say it with certainty," he replied, avoiding my gaze. "If it feels right with the right person, I might consider." "Then you're thinking about cheating?" I pressed, unable to hide my disbelief. "It's not cheating, it's not cheating." "If you know," she replied calmly. I took a deep breath, feeling my blood pressure skyrocket. I took a sip of my coffee. Wishing it was something stronger, I needed to stay calm to handle this conversation. "Let me get this straight," I said, trying to process everything. "You're planning on meeting other men, dating them, and maybe even being intimate while you're still living here with me?" "That's right. It's not that simple," Andrea replied, her voice unsure. "I'm not sure. It still sounds pretty simple to me," I replied. "What about us it's supposed to be, and that we should put our marriage on hold while you explore this?" Of course, Rob. We are a family. I love you deeply, and I want us to remain a family. This is just something I need to do, she said with her eyes pleading for understanding. And how often do you plan to do this? Andrea, every weekend. Several times a week, I asked. And how far do you plan to take this exploration? I will decide as we go, she replied, visibly upset. Why are you so focused on the details? I need to know what my life will be like if you are meeting other men, I said bitterly. I took a deep breath, struggling to contain my rage. Andrea, I need clarity. Have you really made a decision about this? Have you considered what this will do to our marriage? Andrea nodded, but didn't directly answer my question. It seemed like she hadn't thought much about how I would feel. Then she uttered the sentence that would change our future forever. If you love me, will you let me do this? I answered firmly, if you love me, Andrea, you won't. This is my ultimatum. Cheating, even with advance notice, is unacceptable. If you decide go ahead with this, you need to move out. I'm not going to share a house with you while dating and having relationships with other people. Bringing someone here is out of the question. You'll have to find another place to live. Where am I supposed to go? She asked, surprised. Maybe you should consider staying with a friend like Jessica from school who is divorced and lives alone. You spent time with her before. Why don't you ask her if you can stay there for a while? If that doesn't work, you can rent an apartment short-term. You would be responsible for all expenses like utilities and your car payment. Andrea worked as a third-grade teacher at an elementary school and had a sizable income myself. I am a chartered accountant specializing in forensic auditing at a large company, which also allows me to enjoy a good salary and bonuses. Yet, she had mentioned that she felt like I wasn't getting all of her needs met within our relationship. Andrea seemed to notice for the first time my willingness to compromise, as I looked into her eyes, convinced that I had won this argument. If you are interested in having an open marriage, I said, I guess I will have to be patient while you get involved in extramarital affairs. Will you eventually come home to me? Andrea, honey. Of course I will. I love you deeply. You are my husband and I want us to build a family together, she replied. And what am I supposed to do while you are having intimate relationships with other men? Do you expect me to stay faithful to you? In the meantime, yes, she said. I hope you break up with your boyfriends, and when you come back, I will welcome you with open arms and love that will not change my feelings for you. I want you to be my husband and the father of my children. I couldn't help but find her words as a very strange way of expressing love. I had already decided that I would not allow her to bring her lovers into our house. Apparently, she considered it a victory she could enjoy her time with other men without worrying about my interference. Okay, I said firmly. I need you to find out where you are going to stay and let me know this week. For now, I have some things to sort out. I want you to move your clothes and your belongings to the guest room. I'm not sure I can share the same bed with you right now. Your plan is too painful, and I feel like you're leaving me, even if you don't say it explicitly. Andrea remained silent, probably realizing that she wouldn't accept this situation without question. Maybe she was shocked by my request for her to get out of our bed. But what did she expect? She would passively accept her having affairs and then come home to act like nothing had happened. There was no way she would allow that she suspected her friend Jessica had something to do with these ideas. Jessica, a divorced fourth-grade teacher at the same school as Andrea, had been caught cheating on her husband with multiple partners, which led to her being fired 2 years ago. Jessica was an attractive woman, but with a penchant for sleeping with any man who smiled at her. I was convinced that Jessica was influencing Andrea into believing she could explore herself before starting a family. But for me, the reality was simple. If Andrea explored too much, there would be no family, at least not with me alone. I'd like to get a divorce. I got up from the table and started to walk away. Andrea, visibly confused, asked, "Do you really want me to move out?" "Yes, for now. Don't get me wrong, Andrea. But we committed to monogamy when we got married, and you're planning to break that commitment. What do you expect me to do? Do you think I'll just sit back and do nothing while you get involved with other men? If you want a marriage? Open, then I guess I would too have the same option." Andrea was speechless, and I left the house before the argument escalated. I grabbed the car keys, and as I was leaving, I heard Andrea yell, "Where are you going?" "I don't know," I replied. "But in the meantime, move your stuff to the guest room and start looking for a place to stay. And remember, you are not going to have extramarital affairs until you have moved out. I walked out, slamming the door harder than necessary as I briefly considered driving over to Jessica's apartment to confront her. I knew I had to put aside my anger and frustration for the moment. After all, it was Andrea who had started this situation, and she would have to deal with the consequences. Plus, I suspected Jessica would be more than willing to take Andrea in, but I resisted the temptation to confront her. Monday morning, I was already at the office before Andre woke up. I had a lot of work to do, but I had no intention of tolerating her infidelity. If Andrea decided to continue her adventures, I would have to act accordingly. The first step was to contact my attorney. He happened to be an old friend who handled several legal matters, although I didn't expect him to handle the divorce directly. He recommended a competent divorce attorney from his firm, and I scheduled a meeting with her for that afternoon. It was a difficult conversation, but my new attorney was an experienced litigator and knew the laws of our state well. I didn't want this divorce to turn sour. I was willing to have a fair division of our assets, since neither of us had much when we got married. We had both worked hard to build a comfortable life together. But now all of that was at risk. I had no intention of holding on to the assets. If that meant continuing to deal with a cheating wife, I still wouldn't make any final decisions until I had clear proof of her infidelity. The week went by slowly. I spent as little time as possible at home going to the gym to relieve stress. I noticed that Andrea was spending a lot of time with Jessica, and on Thursday she informed me that she would be staying with she for a couple of weeks on Saturday, just a week after celebrating our 5th wedding anniversary. My wife decided to have an extramarital affair. As I watched, I saw her packing her things in the car, getting ready to leave. However, just before she left, she hesitated and said to me, "Honey, I don't want to go. Are you absolutely sure we can't find a way to fix things so I can stay? I love you deeply, and I really want to work on our marriage." I felt exasperated, and I replied, "Andrea, if you really loved me and wanted to work on our marriage, I wouldn't go through with this. I want you to stay home with me, but I can't tolerate you continuing to be intimate with other men while you are still my wife. I love you, but I won't stand for this. If you are not willing to consider going to couples therapy to work out our problems, I don't know what else to tell you. Please think about it." As she loaded her belongings in the car, I decided to leave in my own car, and I went to the hardware store to buy some new locks. When I got back, replaced locks, and changed the security code on the garage door opener. I spent all Saturday night and Sunday at home staring at the walls, hoping that Andrea would change her mind and come home the following week. It was extremely difficult. I tried to distract myself by visiting the gym daily and resuming my running habit to relieve stress. However, I often found myself sinking into a deep sadness, longing to see her even without feeling the urge to beg her to come back. I found it intellectually difficult to comprehend that my wife was willing to leave me for engaging in extramarital affairs while we were still married. I felt like a colossal failure. I was really so inadequate that my wife felt justified in openly exposing her infidelity to try to better understand the situation. I turned to the internet to research the psychology of infidelity and why spouses cheat. I was stunned to discover that approximately 40% of marriages suffer from infidelity, and the most shocking thing was that 90% of those people choose to stay in their marriages, often for the well-being of their children. I was surprised to discover that many unfaithful wives claim that they still love their husbands and their families, but seek the excitement that they feel is missing in their marriage. They claim that the daily routine of childcare and household chores can make sex and intimacy with their husbands feel boring, so they seek excitement with a lover who focuses solely on them without the need to talk about daily obligations afterwards. This led me to wonder if in some way I had neglected Andrea and pushed her away. I wondered if maybe I wasn't giving her what she needed while I focused on building a life for us. However, I still couldn't accept that her infidelity could be the solution to improve our marriage. The days went by slowly, and I avoided contacting her. Andrea only sent me cold and distant messages, asking me to forward her email to her new address. There was no indication that she wanted to save our marriage. She seemed completely focused on her new life. Sometimes the thought crossed my mind of following her to the apartment where she had moved in with Jessica, just to see who she was meeting. I passed by the place several times, but resisted the temptation to stop. I knew I couldn't submit to that. I had to let her make her decision, because if I didn't, She would never really be my wife again. With each day that passed, the possibility of Andrea returning faded a little more. After a month of almost no communication between us, unexpectedly showed up at the house without warning. Her key no longer worked. So she rang the doorbell. I opened the door with a stoic expression and asked her, "What brings you here today?" "Andrea?" she replied. "Honey, my key doesn't work in the lock." "What's going on?" I answered naturally. "That's because I changed all the locks." Andrea tried to get in, but I stopped her and asked her, "What do you want?" Andrea with a dry tone. She replied, "I came to pick up some things I left when I moved in with Jessica." Once again, her visit had nothing to do with Amo. I just wanted her things. There was no hint of wanting to save our marriage. It was just one more formality. She didn't seem to realize the pain she was causing me or the impact of her actions on our relationship. Was it possible that she really believed that her encounters with other men would have no consequences, or she just didn't care enough? "There are some boxes in the garage with your things. I picked them up from all the house," I said to her as I let her in. "Why did you that?" "Love?" she asked, confused. I let her in. Because after all, it was her home, at least in part. She went to the garage and saw several boxes full of her belongings, carefully organized for her to take. When I saw them, I knew that although somewhere in my heart I still loved her with each visit of hers, my hope of getting back what we had faded more. I took a sip of coffee and watched as Andrea went through her things in the garage. "How long do you plan to stay with Jessica?" I asked, hoping for an answer that wasn't another excuse. "But I've been supporting her a lot," she answered without hesitation. "I will be with her a little longer. I'm sure it will only be a few more months, and then I will return. Being a better wife for you, honey. Then we can start a family together." I couldn't help it. I rolled my eyes internally. A feeling of disgust took over me. I really believed that her relationship with other men would make her a better wife. I didn't share her perspective at all without being able to contain myself. I blurted out the next question directly. "So have you found a boyfriend yet?" Andrea blushed immediately. She didn't need me to answer. She already knew the truth, but she decided to admit it. "Yes, and I have gone out with some guys from the club. But it's nothing serious." I had a hard time believing it, and my curiosity increased. "How has the sex been with your new boyfriends?" I asked her, knowing that it would make her uncomfortable. As I expected, Andrea blushed even more. And instead of answering, she began to rummage through the boxes looking for what she needed. I left the garage without saying anything else, returning to the kitchen to finish my coffee and read the newspaper minutes later. Andrea appeared with a fairly large bag and began to inspect the house, perhaps expecting to find some mess. To her disappointment, everything was impeccable. She had hired a cleaning crew that came 3 times a week, so there were no piles of dirty dishes or empty bottles or clothes scattered around the house. The place was in perfect condition. "Do you need anything else?" I asked, trying to maintain my composure. Although inside I was overcome with curiosity. "Honey, have you been fine?" "Since I left with Jay," she asked, apparently more interested in the situation of what he expected. "I'm fine," I answered calmly. "I've been quite busy with work, traveling frequently." Andrea didn't stop probing. "Have you been dating anyone, or have you been staying home all this time?" I knew eventually he would ask that question. "I've been busy," I answered. "I joined a cycling group that meets twice a week. We go out together and ride 40 to 60 kilometers. After, we usually go for a beer and something to eat. I've met a lot of new people. Everyone is very nice." I also mentioned that I had lost 15 pounds in the last few weeks. "Thank you." She looked at me, visibly surprised. Perhaps she was beginning to realize that her plan was not working. As she expected, it was possible that she was seeing that I, her husband loyal, could meet someone else and no longer need her in my life. The truth is that I had already found out more. Andrea had been dating 2 men from the club and had had intimate encounters with both on several occasions. Neither of them seemed interested in her. Beyond those casual encounters, they were married men looking for momentary fun, and Andrea had been their source of entertainment. 2 months after her departure, I finally accepted that my marriage was over. I was ready to move on with my life. Andrea had not tried to contact me for weeks. Clearly, she did not care about our relationship. She had gone on vacation to the Dominican Republic with one of her boyfriends, enjoying the sun and working on her tan, while I dealt with the emotional repercussions of her infidelity. when her mother. She found out about this trip and came to see me worried. I guess she thought we had had a fight, but I decided to be honest with her. Andrea left me to have relationships with other men. I told her frankly. The disbelief on her face was evident, but I suggested she talk directly to her daughter when she finally did. Andrea confessed to her mom. It's not that Robert treats me badly, but I don't feel wanted or attractive to him. I need to feel that way, and right now I'm looking for him. Somewhere else. I plan to have fun before Rob and I start a family. I'll be back in a few months. Hearing that even from her own mother only confirmed what I already knew. Andrea was no longer a part of my life, and her search for thrills and adventures would do nothing to save our marriage. Andrea has been gone for several months, and although I try to keep hope that she will return, it feels more and more unlikely. I still have very present that conversation she had with her mother. Andrea seemed so sure of herself, so confident that everything was going to be okay. Her worried mother because of the situation I had warned her seriously. Dear, if you continue with these extramarital affairs, Robert will not continue to love you. You are risking your marriage. But Andrea, with that characteristic confidence, replied, Mom, do not worry. RCK understands me. He knows what I need. I will return home in a few months, maybe in a year, and we will start a family. Her mother insisted, visibly distressed. You must come to yourself and return home now, or you will not have a marriage or a husband to return to. And of course, there will be no children with him. But Andrea resolute insisted that R loved her, and that everything would be fine. I, on the other hand, knew that things were not going to be so simple. It was difficult to accept that my wife, the woman I married, was enjoying her freedom, and probably looking for validation outside our marriage. It was a bitter feeling, a mixture of betrayal and disappointment. It has been 3 months since Andrea left, and although a part of me hopes that she reconsiders, another part begins to accept that maybe she will not return, or at least not like the woman I met. I decided it was time to try and move on. My life had become a routine of work, gym, cycling, and sleep, all in a monotonous cycle while I waited for this absurdity to come to an end. However, that weight was consuming me, so one day I gathered the courage to take a step out of that routine, and I asked Diane, one of the women in my cycling group, if she would like to go out with me. I was not looking for anything more than company, someone to spend time with and distract myself a little. I was surprised that she accepted, and I proposed a Saturday outing that included kayaking and dinner on Saturday. It was better than I expected. Diane and I kayaked for about 3 hours, covering about 10 kilometers. After that, we went to a lovely restaurant where I ordered a craft beer with a steak, while she opted for white wine and pasta. Everything was relaxed. No pressure. We closed the night with a walk along the pier while eating ice cream. And when I drove her home, she didn't expect more than a cordial goodbye. However, when I leaned in to kiss her on the cheek, she surprised me by kissing me on the lips. It was unexpected but not unpleasant. After that night, I did not want to seem too eager. So I waited until our next meeting at the cycling group before proposing another outing. However, when I suggested going out again, Diane expressed concern, thinking my lack of contact meant I had not enjoyed our date. She quickly said, "Let's make sure we played golf on Saturday." Came around, and although neither of us had great golf skills, we enjoyed the day very much after spending time on the course. We decided to go to my house to have a barbecue while we had dinner and shared a bottle of wine. The night moved quickly. When it was time to take her home, Diane took the keys from my hands and left them on the counter, hinting that she wanted to stay the next morning. I woke up next to her with her arm on my chest. Diane was an attractive woman with her long dark hair, her captivating green eyes, and a small scar on her chin that only added to her character. Her slender and athletic figure, a product of her work as a nurse in the pediatric service, reflected her dedication and energy. We had breakfast together on my patio, and for the first time in a long time, I felt that maybe I could start moving forward. Andrea was still a constant thought in my head, but the reality was that she had taken her own path, and now with Diane, it seemed that I could also start exploring a new path. The conversation soon turned to my plans, and the possibility of divorce was a delicate subject. But I understood the importance of being clear with Diane about my intentions. Before that she would become more emotionally involved. No woman wants to invest her time in a man who could reconcile with his estranged wife at any moment. I explained in detail how peculiar Andrea's justification for leaving me had been, and as I spoke, Diane's expression confirmed what I had already suspected. She also believed that Andrea was not going to come back. I think Diane's emotional support helped me take the next step in my plan. On Monday morning, I contacted my lawyer and asked her to assign a private investigator to the case. My goal was to find out how many men had been involved with Andrea before serving her the divorce papers. The results were revealing. Andrea was dating several men, most of them married, and they used to meet at her friend Jessica's apartment to continue the party, after leaving various bars and clubs throughout the city. 2 weeks later, Andrea was formally served with the divorce petition. That was the beginning of a tumultuous period. That same night, Andrea came home to confront me. When I answered the doorbell, I found myself face to face with my estranged wife, holding a large brown envelope in her hands. Her face reflected anguish. I asked her what brought her there that night, and she answered with a pleading tone. "Honey, a man handed me these papers today. Why did you file for divorce? I told you I would be back soon, even this week. We can start working on that baby." We talked about. I invited her in and took her to the kitchen, asking her to sit down. I replied calmly, "Andrea, it's a little late for that. I told you when you left that I didn't want you to leave, but you did." Anyway, she tried to explain herself. "I told you I needed to find myself, discover who I am, and feel good about myself." I interrupted her with a touch of sarcasm. "And you succeeded. You feel good about yourself. Now you have validated your existence as a woman. You have explored your sexuality in new relationships. You met exciting people and had enough intimate encounters, increasingly agitated." I continued, "Because from what I see, I have received virtually no communication from you. Since you left our house, you didn't even call me on my birthday, probably too busy with one of your boyfriends in the Dominican Republic. Even your mother called me that week, asking why you didn't call her on Mother's Day." Andrea, visibly shaken, tried to defend herself. "Honey, I love you so much, and I realize that maybe I went too far. I'm ready to go home." I replied firmly, "No, Andrea. It's not like that. You read all the papers that were given to you. There is an order from the judge that states that you cannot come within 500 feet of this house until the divorce is finalized. Technically, you are already violating that order. I'm not going to make an issue of this now, but you have to go. We will address this matter in court." The seriousness of my words finally seemed to get through to Andrea. I walked her to the door, closed it. "And let's make sure Andrea received half of our assets as required by law." We sold the house and we both moved on. Onward with our lives. Andrea resumed her new routine, but I heard through a friend that the school where she worked, a charter school, had recommended that she keep her personal life more discreet. Apparently, some parents had found out about her multiple relationships with married men, which made several people uncomfortable, especially the mothers. Those who were quite frank about it in private were rumored to have some of those parents among her lovers. Later, Andrea was diagnosed with a sexually transmitted disease, something that did not put her life at risk but required a year of abstinence. However, it is, or it was not, a significant concern. Since she was already pregnant, one of her lovers had managed to get her pregnant. Andrea's negligence in taking her birth control consistently, her frequent alcohol consumption, and the absence of condom use were factors that contributed to this situation. The father of the baby remained unidentified, although it was said that the child had an resemblance to one of the teachers at his school, a married man. My divorce was officially finalized, and I was finally free from Andrea. It has been about a year since all this confusion began. I bought a new house. I received a promotion at work. The most important thing, Diana and I now live together. We are happy to announce 2 great news. First, we are getting married this summer, and second, we are looking forward to becoming parents by next Christmas.